So my talk today, which I planned before I knew we were going to do this little memorial service, is Jesus got mad. And so I'm going to talk about anger today. Anger is a very powerful force that I know we have all felt. And I actually heard it again in the little prayer that you read for Lonnie. I could feel a frustration and an anger in her as her mind began to go and the things that she used to be doing weren't there. And yet, what did she do with that anger? In that letter, very clearly, she reached out to Spirit for guidance. And what we have a tendency to do with our anger, because many of us have been taught that anger is not okay. It's not okay to feel angry. And so what we do is we get mad at whatever is making us angry and very often lash out and do things that aren't helpful and maybe we end up regretting later. So I want to take a moment to use Lonnie as our way shower today, and that in her moment of frustration, she reached out and asked for guidance and asked for help as how do I pray? How do I pray? And very often anger comes up because it's a situation that is not what we want it to be, and we want it to be different, and we don't know how to make it different. So we maybe get mad, we yell, we blame, and then we end up with guilt and shame afterwards. So when we're angry, maybe we can take a lesson from Lonnie and just say, help me to pray, help me to ask for guidance or ask for the right direction in this situation. And we can also look to our other guides and our way showers, our wonderful brother, Jesus the Christ, who was really here to teach us how to be present in this body. I mean, it's wonderful to understand that some of the spiritual lessons that we get are to meditate, to be quiet, to try to be in that wonderful, peaceful place that we can go to within and that we can imagine perhaps Lonnie is in now. But the truth is, we have to live here in these bodies, in this life, where if you look around at life, there are a lot of things that we can get angry about. Not just the little petty things in our lives, but some of the big things that are happening on the planet, of the pain and the suffering and the things that seem or look out of balance. We can get angry at that. And so we can look at our teachers and realize that Jesus got mad. Right? There are a number of instances that we hear about in the Bible where he got angry. And what he got angry at were the injustices, were the things where people were showing up in ways that weren't for the highest good for themselves and the people around them. Right? Some of the examples I'd like to read is the man with the withered hand, where he was in the synagogue, and apparently there was a rule that you were not supposed to do healings on the Sabbath. And this man showed up with a withered hand, and the priests were there, and they were simply watching Jesus to see what he would do, because they were looking for any excuse to bring him down, to say that he was wrong and get rid of him, because he was stepping up powerfully with his truth and confronting what he saw as out of balance, which for us very much is what our anger does. Things come up and they aren't right. Maybe it's just something in our life that doesn't seem right, or maybe it's something that others are doing to us or others are doing to someone else that we feel is not right. So that anger comes up to say there's something out of balance here and I need to do something. It's an energy that calls us to action. So what Jesus did is he said, Mark, this is from Mark. He entered the synagogue and a man was there with a withered hand. They watched Jesus, the priest they're talking about, to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbath so they might accuse him. And he said to the man with the withered hand, come here. And he said to them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or harm, to save life or kill? But the priests were silent. And he looked around them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart, and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched out his hand and was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him as to how to destroy him. So here he was confronting what he saw was out of balance. He had the ability to heal, and this man was in need, and yet there was a law that said this is not correct. But he stepped up and healed the man with what he knew could lead to great peril for him. And what we do know is that it did. Ultimately, Jesus stepping up and saying, "This is the right thing to do, and I will do it." Confronting it, using his anger to take actions, he did regardless of what the result would be for him. And that's very often why anger comes up in our lives, because maybe we know there's the right thing to do, we know there's some change that perhaps needs to happen, but we're afraid because there may be consequences. There may be consequences. So, how do we decide and choose what the right thing to do, and how do we follow our anger? And for me, it's I look at what is the best thing for all concerned. And I've learned to look at my anger and trust that it's telling me something. And very often, I just need to pray. I need to be with it for a while. Not to fix the anger, but to be in it and to feel it. And to ask, what's the right thing with this anger? And to wait for the answer. I got pulled over on my way up here 3 Sundays ago by the highway patrol and got a ticket. And this ticket, I don't want to tell you how much it cost, but when I got the thing, and I got angry again. I got angry and I got pulled over. But I kind of let it go. I realized I was speeding and trying to get on that little place where it's the passing lane. I was just trying to pass. I wasn't looking at my speedometer, but oops. So, and what I did after I started to get angry, I stopped and breathed. I thought, what's the lesson here? Is this worth getting angry about? And I said, no. The message is I need to slow down. Those laws are there for a purpose, right? To keep people safe. And I can get mad at the cop, mad at the laws, mad at they're charging me so much. But what I learned is to slow down. And on my trip up here today, not only did I slow down, I made a point to put in my book on tape, which was some of the Buddhist teachings, some of the great Buddhist teachers. And so I slowed down and was able to move to a calm place. And so I turned my anger there into a positive action. So, taking responsibility for our anger and making the anger conscious. How often do we react in anger because we haven't really had a chance to look at it? Our buttons are pushed and we don't like the feeling, so we lash out. It's another reason why I feel it's important to be with the anger. It's one of the things they were talking about on this tape on the way up or on the CD, is how in the Buddhist teachings, you allow yourself to be with what's there without having to do something. So that's very powerful, and I found that if I can be with my anger without reacting, but allow myself to respond to it, very often what's coming up with the anger is something much bigger than just the initial situation and lashing out to what's coming up. I can step back and say, hey, something is really out of balance here. And what is its mind to do in this situation? Not to try to fix something that's out there, but where can I come into balance? And very often it does result in taking an action. Sometimes it's drawing a line in the sand. Sometimes it's saying, hey, this works for me and this doesn't. And sometimes, very often, it's not about the initial situation. You look at the initial situation, and when I can sit with the anger, I can go back and go back and go back and say, aha, this is where this started. This is where this initial button got pushed. And what is that situation telling me about? And when I can take the time to allow the process, I get clear that, oh, there's something that I need to begin expressing. Not when it builds up so much that I'm ready to strangle the person, but initially when it happens. So then I can show up lovingly and say, hey, you know, when this happened, this didn't work for me. This is who I am, and this doesn't work for me. And of course, many of us have done that, and then what often happens is the person shows up or somebody else shows up and they do it again. And then there's that anger. How dare they do it again? I already told them. And yet our anger can teach us, you need to say it again. And then you need to draw the line in the sand again. When I was at John of God, that was one of the powerful things I learned. And this is another thing that came up with Lonnie. One of the things people said, she was patient. She was willing to show up lovingly and patiently. When I was down at John of God, there were huge hordes of people all there for the powerful healing that is available. And, you know, after the third day of people lining up and pushing forward, and it was hot, and them calling the lines, and everyone wanted to be able to see John of God and be there in front of that energy. And what he does is he sits there until every single person is seen, no matter how long it was. So there's a wonderful example of patience. All the people who worked there would say again and again, you know, please move back and allow the people in wheelchairs or the older people to come forward. And after they'd said it for maybe the fourth or fifth time, and me, I'm going, why don't you just get out of the way? You know, my anger was coming up, but they continued calmly, never to get angry, but just to continue to guide the people. So it was a wonderful lesson for me about patience and about the anger. And as I looked at my anger was about, well, I wanted mine right now. And when I was able to stop and look at what it is I wanted, I realized I was not in need in actuality. I went down there for some spiritual things, to be in the energy and really to experience it. And when I remembered that, it's like, oh, this is the experience. To be with it, to learn from those other people's patience, to allow the people who were really in need to move forward. And I realized where I was sitting that, oh, I could actually get up right now and allow the woman who was standing over there to sit down. So when I looked at my anger, followed it through, it led me to an action of stepping back and surrendering and moving into loving kindness. So our anger is a powerful guide. When we react and try to push it away and judge ourselves for having the anger, then we very often cause more problems or cause drama. When we can be with our anger without judgment, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago, then we can express our anger in a loving way that doesn't cause drama and isn't filled with resentment. What we often do is we get mad at the person who's making us angry, not just because what they did made us angry, but because how dare you make me angry, because I'm a kind, loving person and I don't like myself when I'm angry. Right? And what I've learned is when I can remove myself, not react, and sit and be with my anger for a while, say, okay, this is what anger feels like, what's really going on. Then I can come back to the person because I've owned and felt my own anger. And I can say, you know, when you did that, this is what I felt. And then if they come back, and whatever they come back with, you know, like, well, blah, 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 I can say, okay, I hear you, but this still is what works for me. And I found myself being able to get very angry, because sometimes just drawing a line in the sand is not enough. You have to really make yourself clear. It's important to be heard. That I can really yell, I can use my voice and get very angry, but not have any blame connected to it, that then the person really hears me. I've had experiences where they go, oh, okay, I get it. And what I used to do in the past when I would get that angry, it wouldn't just be that anger coming up, it would be, and then, back then when you did that, and don't you remember, you know, it would be this whole stuff because I hadn't allowed myself just to feel it. So, of course, we all know about Jesus. The example of that is Jesus with the money changer. So here's one example that I just read about being able to heal the person. He showed up, and even though he knew the priests were not going to accept that, he looked at them, expressed, you know, tried to ask them a question and get them engaged. You know, is it wrong for me to heal this man when he's in need? Is it wrong for me to do good, even if it's the Sabbath? And they refused to answer. So then it comes to the money changers. He walks back into the temple, which is supposed to be a holy place. His life was dedicated to expressing and being the example of God. And here were the money changers. So he didn't just yell and get mad. He threw them out of the temple. He picked up a whip and said, get out of this place. He basically had a meltdown, right? Jesus had a meltdown. So that's a powerful example for us about standing in our truth and drawing our lines in the sand. Sometimes it is necessary in our lives to really stand up and take an action, be strong. Say, this is not right. We saw it with the protests in the 60s. We see it, although not too much on our main news media here, but we see it around the world now where people are standing up against GMOs, against a lot of the corporate takeover of the water supplies. I mean, it is happening in the world now. People are standing up and saying, no, this cannot happen. This is the way that God makes manifest his laws in this physical world. So what I'm inviting you to do this week is look at your anger when it comes up. Be with it, even in the petty things, because in the eyes of spirit, there is no level of life. It's all life, and it all has meaning, or it doesn't. We choose to give it meaning. And so when our anger comes up, really honor that it is a part of you that is longing to bring you into balance, that is calling you to some action. Maybe it's just simply to listen to it. Oh, there's something out of balance here. And breathe. Breathe. Honoring our anger as a vibration that is designed to bring us into balance. So this brings us to what we've been talking about a lot in the past few weeks, is our emotional center, that solar plexus where we feel things. It's not understanding, it's not intellectual, it's not a concept, it's a vibration that's here and now and present and alive within us. We can breathe into it. So I invite everyone just to take a breath into that solar plexus. It's a feeling place that really gives us the experience of life. And Jesus felt all his emotions. The shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept in the Garden of Gethsemane when he knew that, he knew what was coming for him. He wept. He felt the fear and panic of his actions. His standing up and being angry and saying this isn't right and drawing his line in the sand. So I invite you all to honor your feelings and be with them and allow your feelings to teach or guide your intellect. Very often than what we were taught as children very often. But we are adults now, we've made it here, and our feeling sense is bringing us into balance. It's bringing us into alignment. And Jesus taught us that. He felt his feelings very powerfully. He felt his life. He lived, and he died in a very powerful physical way to show us, to help us, to guide us, to be the example that we all can live and be present and be in life, in all our emotions, in all the pain, the struggle, the death, the letting go, and the joys. And that we can have a vision, and that we are guided by God, the good, omnipotent, through our lives, that we are always moving to something better. We are listening to that vibration sense and allowing it to guide us to what's next, to what is the bigger and better expression of our lives, of our connection, of our experience of being alive. So I'd like to end with, because it's interesting, I'd love to show a video of Jesus and the money changers, but we don't have that. But the wonderful thing about our human family is we've had many, many wonderful teachers that have come forward, drawn their line in the sand, and taken our human family to a higher place, to that mountaintop. So I'd like to end by showing one that many of us remember. Many of us were here when he was alive, some of us weren't. But he's a person that really changed humanity, and I want you to hear the powerful use of anger in his voice. How this is the way that you can use anger to direct a change in life for the better, a change in people's lives and a change in the world.
in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country. Maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over that. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so that's because I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around. We aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over. And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you. But I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
So that is righteous anger, expressed in a way that changed the world. And he didn't make it there. We all know that not long after that he was shot on the balcony in the South. And yet I know that as he left his body, he was welcomed into that place of divine. Because he came to do his work and he changed the world. He changed the world. So I invite you, when your anger comes up, if it's not something petty and silly, to own it, but not to deny the anger, to take a moment to be in that place on high, to imagine the mountaintop, whatever that is for you, whatever the world in your dreams, whatever it looks like, whatever your family or your support community looks like. How can you show up and direct that anger to right a wrong that's happening in your life? Come into balance with yourself. So anger is an energy, and we can focus it. If we react, lash it out, we lose the opportunity to respond and focus that energy through our inner guidance. Have a wonderful week, and right now I'm going to focus this final energy to Lonnie, sending her on her way, inviting her to stay in our hearts and guide us in whichever way feels right. And to let her know that though I didn't meet her, I felt her very powerfully here today, and I sent her love. Bless you.